Right now, Pokemon singles are dipping relentlessly. However, one thing that's for sure, there will be a time when they begin to bounce back. And that's why in this video, I'll be going over the 10 Pokemon cards which have a chance to bounce back with a vengeance when we exit this kind of low period or dipping period within the market. So to kick off this list, the first one that we have to talk about in the 10th spot is the Pikachu Special Illustration Rare from Surging Sparks. Now, interesting thing about this card. This card had a wild kind of time when it came on the market, okay? Because when this card released, it straight away got the title of the most expensive special illustration rare in the Scarlet and Violet era. Prior to the Pikachu, it was the Magikarp illustration rare. You had the Greninja special illustration rare. But then this Pikachu came along and it was like, wow, we've got a new king, okay? But then here's the thing. As time's gone on, as things have changed, people are now less inclined for this card. And this card has gone down substantially from its high point, over 200 US. So because of that, people aren't really that kind of gravitated towards this card anymore. Now don't forget, this card also had a bit of a weird kind of story that happened because when it released, it looked great. But then right after that, do you know what happened? Prismatic Evolutions got released. And you know what? Everyone just looked at the Pikachu and said, hey Pikachu, you're cool, but check out this Umbreon, check out this Espeon, check out this Ceruledge, check out this Leafeon. You know, everyone just went to the Eeveelutions. Now there's a few things about this card as well. Number one, the artwork is cool to some people they don't like it. I've already spoken that I do like the artwork of this Pikachu, but a lot of people found it a bit underwhelming, which is kind of weird, the fact that it got that price point when it had so much debate within the community whether or not it's a good artwork. A lot of people just decided to buy this card because, hey, it's Pikachu, it's the mascot of the franchise, and why not have a Pikachu special illustration rare? People just started ticking boxes that it was going to be a successful card. Now, it still is a very successful card given its price point, but still, it has dropped a fair bit, and I do think we do have reprints on the way. Surging Sparks is coming more and more in stock throughout 2025. But, you know, there will come a time eventually where everyone kind of reflects on the Scarlet and Violet era and people look back at this Pikachu. So I wouldn't count this one out because I do think there's a high chance this card can come back with a vengeance. I did make a video talking about the 7 Pokemon that are always great investments. Now, Pikachu does make this list given the fact it is Pikachu and how much kind of fan demand there is around it. Now, moving on to number 9, we have the Greninja Special Illustration Rare. The Greninja SIR was always one of the more unique cards to me, okay? Because when it kind of got revealed in Twilight Masquerade, I think a lot of people started saying, wow, what is this artwork? It's way too messy. This is one of my top favorite artworks from the whole Scarlet and Violet era. I just really like the chaotic artwork, the art style. I think it really does well. I think the Terastallized phenomenon works well with some cards and some cards it doesn't. But with this Greninja, I think it really does work well, and it gives it a very unique position for Generation 9. A lot of people say, you know, with Generation 9, oh, I don't like the hats and the crystals, you know, it's a bit off-putting. But what I do like about it is the fact that it kind of traps these cards within this era. Don't forget, guys, once the Scarlet and Violet era closes, we're not going to be getting hats and all these, you know, the gems and all that on the Pokemon cards anymore. They're gone, right? But, you know, when it ends, people are going to look back at this era and say, you know what, Terastallized, that was awesome. I love the Terastallized phenomenon. It will happen eventually, but then again, time has to do its thing. But this Greninja, even though it's having a pretty significant pullback right now in the market, I wouldn't count it out just yet, given the fact of how awesome of an artwork it is. And again, the pull rates for the Greninja are ridiculously difficult, so that just adds a lot of demand for this card because it is quite a challenging card to pull. Now also, if you have been enjoying the video and would like to see future lists like these, feel free to subscribe to the channel. My name's Phil and I cover topics relating to the Pokemon TCG. It's always awesome having new people on board the channel. Now, moving on to the next spot, we have the Magikarp illustration rare. Now, I have huge love for this card in particular because it was kind of the first card to set where the Scarlet and Violet era was heading. A lot of people were disappointed with Scarlet and Violet base, which kind of didn't make sense to me because it's like, dude, it's a base set. Base sets are never going to be the most extravagant set you get. You're not going to be over the moon that you got a base set. They're kind of a way to introduce everyone to a new era slowly. So during this period, okay, everyone was focused on Sword and Shield. People didn't move on. People still wanted Crown Zenith. People still wanted the Lugia V, Silver Tempest. Everyone's eyes were far more glued to the Sword and Shield era, and people were reluctantly moving on. though this Magikarp, I feel, was the first turning point where the Scarlet and Violet era really saw that, hey, it's going to have potential, and hey, maybe this era is going to be even more popular than Sword and Shield. This card started it all. Now, the pull rates for this card are very difficult, but the PSA 10 rate of this card is ridiculously low. 1 in 5 chance that if you get this card in near mint sent to PSA, that it's going to come back as a PSA 10. So that brings a lot of demand for this card. But the reason why I think that this card will eventually bounce back is because the price of Paldea Evolved booster boxes is going out of control. Paldea Evolved is quite an old set. I do think that the Magikarp illustration rare really was one of the most iconic cards from the Scarlet and Violet era, and I really think it set it up on the right path. So I do think that when this kind of era kind of ends, where everything's kind of coming down in price right now, I do think this is going to be one of the first cards to see a market pullback. Now, moving on to the next one, it is the Gardevoir Special Illustration Rare from Paldean Fates. Now, this card is unbelievable, though before I actually get into this card, for some exciting news, I've teamed up with Collector and we are both giving away this PSA 10 Gardevoir. You can enter the giveaway on my channel's Discord, which is in the video's description. Now, today's video is sponsored by the Collector app. The Collector app is a next generation portfolio manager that manages your collectibles and updates pricing in real time. Now, if you've downloaded the latest update from Collector, they've actually added a set analytics tab, which you can see clear historical performances from a particular set. And you can see it shows a volatility score based on recent price fluctuations. It also shows you the particular market movers inside the set, so you actually get to have a real good overview of a particular set. Now, if you do have the Pro version, you can also scan your cards from your phone for them to appear within the app, which makes it very easy to populate your collection. The set analytics is a great new addition, and you can find more details of Collector within the video's description. A huge thank you to Collector for sponsoring the video. Now let's get back into it. Now, the Gardevoir Special Illustration Rare to me was always an interesting card, given the fact that it was so unique in its design and it's a shiny Pokemon as well. I do think this card was overshadowed by a lot during its time period because, you had so much things happening in 2024, and I think a lot of people put it on the back burner. So I wouldn't count out the Gardevoir in any way, shape, or form. Now, moving on to number 6, it is the Iono Special Illustration Rare from Paldea Evolved. Now, for some fun history, this Iono was kind of projected to be one of the biggest cards for the Scarlet and Violet era at its time, which is kind of funny to say right now because what happened was when this card released in the Japanese version, people went wild for this Iono, huge kind of fan favorite from the Generation 9 games. The character itself is a pretty awesome character because, Iono's a streamer, really modern, fit with a lot of people really liked her. But here's the thing, even though this card was performing absolutely wildly for the Japanese version, the English version, while it was in demand when the card came out, it did see a pretty big drop. And this is why it's important to know this. Sometimes when a set releases, you're kind of looking at it and it looks amazing for its time. But as more sets come out, as the Scarlet and Violet era evolved, the Iono SIR and even the Miriam Special Illustration Rare, which were very in demand when they released, weren't able to hold their kind of positions in the market and they became less desirable. But I wouldn't count out this Iono in any way, shape, or form because it still is a massive, massive fan favorite for a lot of people. And Iono is a very popular character within Pokemon as well. So, don't count it out just yet. Now, moving on to number 5, we do have the Eevee from Twilight Masquerade. Now, here's the thing, okay? This Eevee was in demand when it released, but here is the kind of issue or the problem that you want to call it. Now, here's the thing. This Eevee was very in demand when it came out. A lot of people liked it. Had a real big market pull up as well. Reached over 100 USD at one point. Now, what happened with this card? Before Prismatic Evolutions came out, this was the only Eevee card, and a lot of collectors were looking back at Evolving Skies, and everyone was just waiting for the next Eevee set of cards because Evolving Skies kind of set the standard of what to expect for Eeveelutions and Eevee cards in particular. So because of that, everyone was just really patiently waiting. When an Eevee card comes out, when an Eevee set comes out, we're going to go really hard in the set. Of course, that's what happened with Prismatic Evolutions. But before that, you had this Eevee card. Now, collectors all just said, you know what, it's an Eevee. It's going to have to be, an in-demand card just because it's Eevee. But like I said, this card got quite overshadowed when Prismatic Evolutions came out because you had the whole Eeveelutions come around and everyone really loved those new cards within the set. And of course, this Eevee took quite a step backwards. So I think it will take some time, but I wouldn't count this card out in any way, shape, or form because I think it's dropped a fair bit in price. And sure, it can keep going lower, but then again, when Pokemon cards decide to get out of this little lull period, this card in particular could have a market bounce back. Now, moving on to number 4, it is the Miriam Special Illustration Rare. And of course, I already spoke about the Iono, but this Miriam in particular is one to look out for, in my opinion. As I already said about the Iono, when the Scarlet and Violet era started, it was kind of also at the same time period where the whole Japanese Japanese female trainer card boom was happening as well. And, you know, a lot of these cards kind of just got caught in that wave as well, and people really like these cards. Now, Miriam in particular, and I always said it was a very desired card back then. Now, as time's gone on, this card has fallen off a cliff, and even though it had a little bit of a market bounce back, it's still kind of gone down straight away as well, because the demand for this card isn't really there like it once was. But then again, people get kind of nostalgic for things. People look back. A lot of people that were collecting before this boom kind of look back at this period and say, you know what, that was a really cool period and we didn't realize what we had. Pokemon 151, I think a lot of people are just thankful that it released before the boom, because if Pokemon 151 released, you know, now, man, that would be a tough set to kind of get your hands on, as you could see with Blooming Waters. But, you know, this kind of period was unique, and I do think, you know, as time goes on, don't forget Scarlet and Violet base isn't getting any easier to get, and I highly doubt as the years go on, we're going to get more Scarlet and Violet base. Even though it's not the most exciting set, I do think there's a lot of love for the set, and I do think people will be drawn to some of these cards as time goes on as well. Now, also, if you do enjoy my content and you have been a long-time viewer, I actually have launched the second channel called Philip's Trick Room, which is a Pokemon gaming and lore channel. You can find the second YouTube channel within the video's description. Now, moving on to number 3, it is the Terapagos Special Illustration Rare from Stellar Crown. Now, Terapagos is a very interesting Pokemon in my opinion. I think it's an awesome design, okay? And I think this artwork in particular is really cool as well. I think Stellar Crown got kind of sandwiched between Twilight Masquerade, then you had Surging Sparks, and then of course you had the Pokemon TCG Pocket Boom. And because Stellar Crown was a smaller set, everyone's kind of just brushed it off to the side. It never really makes that much noise. You know, sometimes if you go into stores, you will see one of the only sets you can buy is Stellar Crown booster packs, right? So I think as time's gone on, people have just looked at Stellar Crown and all the cards in Stellar Crown are just falling off a cliff. But this card in particular, I think is at quite a decent price point at this stage. And I do expect that, you know, when people look back at this era and, you know, time does its thing, this card could experience a market pullback. Don't forget, it is still a special illustration rare. It still is a box legendary from the Gen 9 DLCs, okay? So because of that, you do have a lot of fan demand. So, you know, things can change, right? You do have the Terapagos SIR from Prismatic Evolutions, but I personally prefer this one from Stellar Crown. So let's see how it goes. Now, moving on to number 2, it is the Pikachu Hyper Rare from Surging Sparks. Now, this card has had a pretty significant market pullback, but like I always tell everyone, this card is technically, along with all the other hyper rares, are the rarest cards to pull within the set. So when you're dealing with such difficult pull rates, you know, there's going to be far less of this card than the special illustration rare Pikachu. But as time goes on, I wouldn't count any of these cards out, especially because it is a Pikachu and it is a hyper rare. Given the difficult pull rates, I do think a lot of people are going to be looking at this card. Look, Surging Sparks right now is in a bit of a weird position because we know we're getting much more on the market, but it could be interesting to see what happens with this card in particular. And of course, in the number 1 spot, it is the Bubble Mew, which I personally believe is one of the most iconic cards from the Scarlet and Violet era, and it is a very well-designed artwork. This card just ballooned in value throughout 2024, and it just wasn't stopping at any point. It was actually getting quite absurd on how high the price for this card was getting, and it finally did find a tipping point where it started going down in price. Now I think we're in a position where more Paldean Fates is coming on the market, but I wouldn't ever count out Bubble Mew because it still is Mew, which is a very desired Pokemon. It is a shiny version as well, and the artwork is very unique, so I do think that this card in particular could have a pretty big pullback when all this kind of era ends. Though with all these cards entering the market, it does seem Pokemon cards are just continuing to get printed at an accelerated rate. Though even though some of these cards may have a bounce back, there's also some serious questions relating to Pokemon's cards' future, especially as it was revealed that 10.8 billion cards were printed in the last year alone. And it does bring up a lot of uncertainties for Pokemon cards' future value, and I explain what the main issue is within this video here. Within this video on screen, I go over the main problem when printing over 10.2 billion Pokemon cards in a single year. I'd recommend watching this video that's appearing on screen to learn more about that there. Click the video that's appearing on screen and we'll talk more about it there. I'll see you on the next video.